Hi there, I'm Amy Ellis from Amy's Creative Side and Sew Modern Quilts. If you're anything like me, threading a new long arm machine is a little bit daunting. There are so many little places to catch the thread and make sure that everything is seated properly. So today I'm going to walk you through my threading process for the top and the bobbin and make sure that you have all the help that you need in getting started on your next quilt. Let's get started. Threading your long arm starts with a cone of thread. I've selected this bright pink today, so hopefully you can watch all the steps and see the thread move through all the steps easily. And I'm using a cone. Most long arms prefer cones to spools, and you can get an attachment for a lot of them to be able to use your specialty threads on spools and have it still flow off of the cone or the spool really easily. The point here with the hook on top is to unspool your thread with as little tension as possible, because we want to be able to manipulate the tension with the tension discs only, right? So our next step is this thread guide, and this one will just click in place. You can hear it. And then we're going to go through these holes here on this thread guide. So I like to start with a fresh snip of my thread to make sure it's nice and clean. And then we're just going to go through all three of these holes, just from the back to the front. And I just use like that inch tip and keep the rest of the thread taut in my other fingers behind, so that I'm not dealing with, you know, tying a knot around it. That's not what we want at all. So now that all three have been looped and threaded, I'm just going to pull that real gently. Next is another thread guide here, and we're just going to pull this through. These take a little bit of effort so that your thread doesn't pop out. And so I usually use two hands and just kind of pop it into place there. Now the tension discs, we have no presser foot on the long arm machine, and so the tension is always on. Presser foot on a domestic machine will release the tension discs so that you can easily thread the machine. But in this case, we do not have that because of the lack of presser foot. So we have to make sure that we seat the thread in the tension discs properly and carefully. So again, I use two hands, and I am working from the back and going around. See, that's underneath. And I like to keep tension with one hand and then thread with the second hand. That way I know that it's tight in there and it's not going to release in any way. So, and you can kind of floss that through and make sure that it's tight. And then we need to catch this little spring here at the top. So next we go under this bar here, so it's underneath there, and then I go ahead and pull the tension tight. Finally, we're going to thread the thread through the take-up lever here, and again, just from back to front, we're always threading towards the front of the machine. So that's one more little tidbit to keep in mind. And so now you should feel, as you pull on the thread, some good tension. And one thing that I learned early on is if you're having tension trouble, your tension knob can tighten it all the way down, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, right? And then come back 6 full turns, and that should give you somewhat of a starting point for setting your tension for your thread and your machine. That's just a starting point. If you already have good tension, don't mess with it. By any means, don't mess with it. But if you're still fumbling, trying to figure out the right tension for your machine, hopefully that can be of help. Next, we have a thread guide here, and with the tension now on the thread from the tension discs, you can just wind that in. You just want to make sure that it is seated fully. And then we're going to go down to the needle. The final steps in threading the needle are through this thread guide right here. And now we're going from the front to the back, and I've had to change my position as well, and then through the needle. And this gets easier with time and practice, but also there's needle threaders. If you need one, use one. Now we have our upper thread completely threaded and ready to stitch. Let's look at the bobbin case close up and see those different aspects and components. This bobbin case has this tension disc. It sits right in here, and you can see it's kind of springy, but it's really thin. And there's two little pockets where this disc is seated on the back of the bobbin case. So one is bigger than the other. If your spring is not properly seated, then you'll want to make sure that you have the right size on, you know, in the right little notch. Here is the screw that you use to adjust your tension on the bobbin case. And here I like to use tiny turns, like quarter turns at most, and then test. But occasionally you can get a buildup of lint underneath here, and I will just use one of my really fine pins to run underneath there, and that's really all you need. You don't want to pry it open or do anything else to it. You just want to make sure that there's nothing built up in there, because that can affect your tension and cause trouble for you. And so when loading your bobbin into the bobbin case, the thread comes off clockwise, and you seat it inside here, and it will kind of bounce out a little bit, which is normal and fine. It bounces less with a full bobbin, but my bobbin is mostly empty now. And then it will, you want to pull the thread into this slit right here, and then pull it up and click it into place so that it is seated in the tension housing. And that's the nuts and bolts of getting that in there. And then for the tension itself, I like to be able to lift it up off my hand just a tiny bit, but not like dangle it. If it's dangling, then your tension's probably too tight and you're getting a lot of your top thread on the back of your quilt, and not necessarily in a pleasant way. That's a good starting point, just kind of where it lifts, but it doesn't lift out of your hand. You don't want it to dangle. So if you drop it, it will just go ahead and drop to the table. So it is suggested that you change your needle every 8 hours of quilting. It's also suggested that you oil your machine with every bobbin. So at the very least every other bobbin, but you want to make sure that it's working smoothly and happily all the time. I wanted to show you where you need to add a little bit of oil to your machine. First we're going to drop the needle into the lower position, and then I can get in there with my oil. Your machine should have come with one of these little oil cases, and it has a nice long spool pin. You want to keep that out so you don't make a mess of your oil. And then just right in here at the very tip, you want to add that oil. And I like to just do a drop at a time, and then pull the thread or the needle back up. Finally, when you load the bobbin into the shuttle, you want to hear it click. So it's a pretty good click, and you want to make sure that, that you hear that sound so that nothing is falling apart as you're stitching. Find a really nice thread that you like and that your machine likes, and use that one thread in all the different colors that you need for all the quilting that you do. So you'll find that probably 70 to 80% of your quilts are quilted with the same couple of neutral threads, and those are easy to keep on hand. And then occasionally you'll want to add some other colors to your quilt. If you have the same thread in your bobbin and your needle, there's a lot less tension issues to sort through as you are getting comfortable with your long arm, and that's something that's helped me a lot. I wish you all the best on your quilting journey with your new long arm. If you have any questions or comments that you have found helpful, please let me know in the comments, and I look forward to connecting with you there.